Welcome back to the Garden with Joy and Holly radio show. Happy that you've joined us today. Holly, let's go to the hotline and bring in our guest for this week.
Dee Nash is an author, gardener, blogger, garden coach, and garden speaker. She enjoys gardening on her half-acre garden on her property in Oklahoma and telling her readers all about it. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, we appreciate the time you're going to offer us. And I'll start with this. You're a garden coach. What is that, and why would somebody utilize your services or a service of someone who has the title of a garden coach?
A garden coach is someone who basically holds the hands of people who they might be just getting into gardening, or they might be experienced gardeners, but say they moved from your state to mine and they don't know how to garden here. That would be one example. I have several people that are from out of state and they just don't know how. And then the other thing is sometimes people are brand new and they just need someone who can come in, help them know what plants work in their garden, what kind of, compost to get, and just different things, how to water. But whatever they need, I'm there for them. And then I follow up with them, and then they can text me and ask me questions. In fact, I answered some tonight.
And with the wonderful advantage of technology, if you can't be there or whatever the case is, they can physically walk through the garden with their phone and you can coach them and go, this is that, or this is this, or stop doing that, or harvest this.
Right. When they're out of the city,
right.
I often do it over Zoom. And then sometimes we use FaceTime. And they'll walk around and do FaceTime, and then we come back to Zoom. If we do it that way, I follow up with an email with all the details.
Right.
And I also do a drawing for them too, just something simple. It's a lot less expensive than having a landscaper come out, and it's for people who actually want to garden.
Right. And you spoke about, helping someone who may have moved from our area to your area. Though those growing zones may be similar, there's a lot of things that are extremely different. Diseases
Very
and
different.
bugs and soil condition, the whole deal. You might as well forget what you've known and start all over when you move somewhere else.
That's definitely true. Yeah.
So where did your passion from gardening come from? Is this a lifelong thing or something that came later on in life?
No, I started gardening probably in my teens with houseplants, the great introduction that many people have to gardening. And then but I toddled behind my grandmother like so many other people, and she taught me a lot about gardening even when I was really small. I have an actual vision where I can see my little white shoes against the black dirt, those little training shoes. That's my first thought about gardening. And then my second one is she taught me about cabbage moths, and I still remember it. I was probably about 4 years old then. So I would walk along with her, and she meant everything to me, and so I loved her garden. It was beautiful. It was primarily a vegetable garden.
Now, did she instill this in you, hoping that you would pick it up, or was she like, you're going to learn this because you're going to need this later on in life, or a little bit of both?
I think she just loved it so much that it just came from her, and she always cooked all the food out of the garden, and she was a great cook. And I think it was just she liked to be with me, I liked to be with her, and she loved it, and I loved it too. I have a granddaughter now, and she's the same way. And everything is, Gigi, tell me this, Gigi, tell me that. So it sometimes skips your kids, but the grandchildren, you just have a special relationship with them.
Well, and all our grandparents, and you've probably had this experience, they could cook things that we can't duplicate because we don't know how much love they put into it.
That's right. It's all about love.
Definitely. So let's talk about your book, the 20 to 30 something garden guide, a no fuss down and dirty gardening 101 for anyone who wants to grow stuff. Tell us about, if our listeners pick up a copy, what they can expect, and why, maybe what would pique their interest.
Okay. So I wrote that book because all of my kids are in that age range. And they knew all about gardening because they lived out here with me and knew about chickens and all the things I did while they were growing up. But their friends didn't, and I wanted to leave a legacy, and so that's why I wrote the book. And it starts out, it makes a great housewarming gift. So a lot of people buy it for their friends or nieces or nephews, or sometimes for wedding gifts. And it's great with a basket with a trowel and some other things in it. And I start out with containers, and then we move on to raised beds, and then we move it into some in-ground stuff, and there are plans and all the different ways you can grow. It's primarily vegetable gardening, but the last plan that I drew is a circular garden, and it has both plants for pollinators and it also has vegetables. So it's starting out, like a garden coach, and just starting with the simplest thing and then moving on over to the more complicated things.
Well, I want to touch on the increase in temperatures this summer, and we see this for whatever reason, you fill in the blank, and we won't get into discussion whether it's this or that, but we notice the temperatures are getting warmer. You are in the Oklahoma area where temperatures get hot early and stay hot long time. What are some tips for hot weather gardening that you can offer most of us gardeners in the north that don't experience that type of heat that may be starting to in the years to come?
That's a tough one. So my biggest tip for anybody is know how you're going to water before summer comes, because when it's hot like that, you don't feel like getting out and watering your containers every day or your, regular gardens. I use drip irrigation throughout most of the garden, including most of my pots, and that helps. The other thing is, mulch is essential, and I think good compost is essential, and you can use compost as mulch or other biodegradable things. The main thing is, and I would say in our case in Oklahoma, our weather is just weird anymore. And we had a very long spring this year that was extremely wet, and that's not our norm. And that's when you guys got all the heat, because I watch the weather maps for the whole United States because I'm interested in how the patterns go. It's just different than it used to be. I will say our seasons are longer. I suspect you guys are having the same thing.
Yes.
You have to buy plants that can handle the heat. And I would say take your phone out with you into the garden, keep it in your pocket, and take pictures of things that did well. And, put them into your notes so that you can repeat those things next year.
And you said put them in your notes. And I was going to reference that because, we can take pictures with our phone, but sometimes our phones don't last as long, or they get dropped in the water, or whatever, and the cloud's not always the greatest. Write it on a piece of paper. You
can totally write it on a piece of paper. I was actually thinking about notes that you would use with your computer, because all my stuff is tied together.
Uh-huh.
But you can totally, there are specialty notebooks you can take out that are water resistant and make notes in your garden. I think notes are very important.
And I love taking pictures with the phone, but I guess, being 41 years old, I'm old fashioned because I still like writing it on a piece of paper and seeing it instead of on a digital. Oh, it's on a piece of paper, so it can't disappear.
Right. My husband is like that.
Well, it can disappear, but yeah. You give a presentation about how to help the monarch butterflies. What are some things people can do to help?
Don't use pesticides in your garden. That's the first thing. And don't use, there was a new study that just came out, and I think it was in Scientific Digest, and it was again talking about neonicotinoids, which is a problem. That's a new study. But the biggest thing you can do besides not using pesticides in the garden is to plant milkweed. And now they're saying plant milkweed that is native to your region. So I don't know which ones are native to your region. I know that in mine, common milkweed is, and green milkweed, which is also called antelope milkweed. There are several. I think in Oklahoma we have 9 different ones because we're part of the prairie. So I assume you have several too. And so the more milkweed we plant, that helps because, they used to be on farms, and you're part of the migration path just like we are and just like Texas is and Kansas. And so what we're trying to do is get them from point A to point B. And so when they start to return down here, they have to have a food source. And that food source, it has to be, it's better if it's native. I know that I'm not going to get into, several people still use tropical. I'm not going to, judge them for that at all. It's just the newest data from everybody says that we should do native ones.
And there's over 140 different species of milkweed and around 100 native to North America. So if you don't know, ask your local extension office. or your
Right.
independent garden center, they will know the answer so you can get the right milkweed. Because it doesn't do you any good if you plant stuff that grows native to South Carolina and you're in Iowa. It really doesn't help anybody out.
No, it doesn't, because they're just totally different types of milkweed and they won't flourish. So, for example, common milkweed flourishes really well in certain parts of my garden, but it is a colonizer. And you have to know that about native plants. Some of them are colonizers.
Well, with growing in Oklahoma and your garden, what is one of the challenges outside of the heat you have? I know at one point we spoke years ago, and it was, I think, rose bush rust was something that you guys had dealt with.
Rose rosette.
Okay.
Yeah. Rose rosette disease, which actually is now called rose rosette virus. And it did blow all the way through here and blew down into Texas, and it destroyed a lot of roses with it. Now, I guess the mites have moved on because we don't have as much trouble with it as we once did. So that's good news. What are we having trouble with now? Well, a wildfire blew through my neighborhood, and I mean my actual neighborhood, in 2023. So California, we have dry times just like California does. And that was in March of 2023, and it burned up my entire neighborhood. So I always tell people that it's very important to plant firewise around your house, and you can find that information through the National Forest Service and some other places. And I think there were a couple of reasons my house didn't burn down. There were only 6 houses left in my neighborhood and it blew through in 20 minutes.
Wow.
And it was caused by an electrical line blowing in the wind. So when those prairie winds come down, they can go up to 60, 80 miles an hour. And that was one of those days. So one of the reasons it didn't burn is I have a water system, and having an irrigation system really does help. It did burn up some of it, but I got it fixed. But the land around my house is not super dry, and I don't plant evergreens right up next to my house. That's a couple of things.
For people who've never experienced that, I'm going to assume in 20 minutes you got time to get out and stay alive, and that's all you have to think about. You can't think about anything else.
Yeah, you barely had time to do that. And the real miracle, and there were several miracles that day, and I don't say that lightly, no one died. And that was huge, because several people were older and they took naps in the afternoon, but everyone found them. But they had just enough time to get out, and that was it. Right. So that's something that's different. It's warmer than it used to be, and things dry out, and we definitely have fire times. So that's one thing.
Well, Dee, we greatly appreciate the time you've offered. How can people find out more about you if they're in the area, get your request your services, and for the rest of us, pick up your book?
You can get my book still on Amazon. It's still popular and it still sells, which I'm grateful for. As far as, I also have a podcast with Carol Michael out of Indiana, and we did that because we're both in the center of the United States and we're friends, and it's called The Garden Angelists. And you can find me with my blog, or you can find me on Instagram or Facebook. I never got into TikTok. It wasn't my thing, but I do love Instagram, and I post on there quite frequently and do videos and talk a lot about native plants and other plants that thrive well in your climate and in mine.
Well, thank you so much for the time you've offered us and the information you've shared with Holly, myself, and all of our listeners. We are appreciative of that.
It was so much fun. Thank you guys so much for inviting me.
Thank you.